Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour to help people stay connected by staying together around the campfire, telling each other stories. And I'm pleased to announce that we also have a SIFWA Givers Grant because everybody, well, at least some of the very best people, understand that the power of stories is great. So welcome back to those of you returning, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. As always, we have two writers reading their own work. Tonight's readers are returning favorite Johnny Compton and your next new favorite, Dee Holloway. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat if you like. If you're joining us on Facebook, absolutely chime in on that text chat. But please understand that we may not be right there on Facebook with you. We'll catch up to you as soon as we can. We promise. Well, without further ado, our first reader tonight is Johnny Compton. Johnny Compton is a San Antonio-based author whose short stories have appeared in various publications since 2006, including Pseudopod and Strange Horizons. In 2020, his work made the preliminary ballot for a Stoker Award. His fascination with the frightful fiction started when his kindergarten teacher played a record of the classic ghost story, The Golden Arm, for the class. He operates the independent podcast Healthy Fears, and his debut novel, The Spite House, was a Bram Stoker Award nominee. Johnny, welcome.
Thank you for having me back.
Always a pleasure. Now, I think that I may have had a slightly old bio for you. So if there's anything else exciting coming up that you'd like to tell us about, let me know.
Probably just book two, Devils Kill Devils,
Book two, Devils Kill Devils.
coming in September.
Well, that looks exciting.
Thank you.
And what have you got for us tonight?
I've got a short story previously unpublished, unheard by the world that I'm very excited to share. It is a crime noir slash horror hint of a story.
Ooh, what an honor for us. Please start anytime.
Perfect. It is called The Ref by Johnny Compton. Laz Moron returned to the table with the rye whiskey Brian had ordered, as well as the question he'd wanted to ask all evening. You think it's better to die drunk or sober? Shit, what are you asking me that for? Brian said, taking his drink and knocking half of it back before setting down the glass. We're having a good night. Jesus, who wants to think about that? Why would you ask that? I got a reason. You can probably guess. Come on, Laz. Just answer, and don't say it doesn't matter and neither is any good or anything like that. But neither is any damn good, Brian said, laughing loud enough to draw attention had they not been the only two people in the bar, minutes ahead of closing time. People dying whichever way probably wish it was the other way, or no way. Fine, I'll say sober. But honestly, it's like you're asking me if I'd rather eat a bug or a rat. Yeah, it's easier to choke down the bug, but who took steak off the menu? Laz's polite smile turned into a short-lived scowl when Brian immediately finished the rest of his whiskey. It was like he'd seen someone else spit in his friend's drink, but hadn't had time to warn him. How Brian could inhale liquor that smelled like burnt medicine was a marvel. Brian wiped his lips and gray beard, though Laz was sure he hadn't wasted a drop. As the man he met first 40 years ago at Leyenda's boxing gym moved on to his second pint of amber lager, Laz nipped at his own drink carefully, like there might be crushed glass in it. About that reason, Brian said. Do I need to be worried about you? Maybe, Laz said. Probably. He sighed, smacked his lips, glanced at the disinterested bartender as though he might be eavesdropping. With a lowered voice, he continued. You might get a little upset with me about this. You might even want to hit me, but I hired a guy recently. A hitman. Well, actually, I hired a guy to find. Wait, what? You paid somebody to. Listen, I paid this guy to find somebody for me who could kill people for hire. I paid a lot, everything I had saved up, because I really wanted somebody good. You know, you read these stories, and it's always funny to me when somebody pays like 2 or 3 grand for a hitman, and the plan goes to shit, and they get caught. Of course, the plan fell through. You went cheap on something that should cost a fortune. 2, 3 grand? That's what, half the down payment on a car these days? Hell, that's a little bit depressing to think about. Hey, stay on topic, Brian said. What the shit, Laz? Who the hell would you want to. Well, was it something to do with Harper? Somebody else giving you shit about that? Pretty much, yeah. Jesus, some people. The man's own mother and children can forgive you, and that isn't good enough. Let me guess, whoever it is, they're not even a relative. Or if they are, they're probably a third cousin or his nephew's nephew or some shit. Or just me. Yeah, or just what? Laz nodded, squinted past the pain in his eyes that almost felt like fatigue, and that was related to it. What do you mean you? Brian said. I mean me. I hired a man to kill me. I can't do it myself, and I wanted it done. I needed it done. Jesus Christ, Laz, what the shit? Are you serious? This is one fucked up joke if you're joking. I'm serious. Brian rubbed his beard again, leaned back in his chair, stretched, looked ready to get up and pace the floor of the bar from the bathrooms to the front door. He was always expressive, demonstrative, but when he'd been drinking, he almost ventured into performance. He pointed his finger like he was trying to throw it off his hand. You weren't lying when you said I'd want to hit you. I want to jump across this table right now. What were you thinking? That I was tired, Laz said. Oh, that's it, tired. After all this time, now you're that tired. I've been that tired for all this time. Tired and pissed off. Every time I look in the mirror, I want to drag the other guy out and beat him to death. If you didn't know that, then we aren't the friends I thought we were. That's a fucked up thing to say. That's a hell of a thing for you to say to me. In the ensuing silence, Laz could hear the clinking of the glassware as the bartender started cleaning up early, knowing no one else was coming in. His only two customers, two irregulars, had braved icy roads and a cutting wind chill to be there. The night Harper died hadn't been quite this cold, quite this harsh, but close enough for Laz to feel it was fitting. What was it people said? History doesn't always repeat, but sometimes it rhymes, something like that. In this case, the rhyme was imperfect at minimum. Similar to Brian, Laz had been too stiff and slow to have any success as a boxer, even as an amateur. That was okay. You could still involve yourself in your passion and even make a solid living working within it despite never quite living your dream. He'd made it as a ref after all. A good one for years before the Harper fight. Building relationships in the fight game meant being 2 or 3 degrees removed from lifelong criminals at most, though. Laz didn't know if that also applied to other fields, though he imagined being a producer in the music industry or a big enough businessman on Wall Street meant the same applied, but he could only say for sure that it was true to the world of boxing. Knowing somebody who knew somebody who would kill somebody for 5 or 6 figures was one of the grim perks of spending 3 days as a referee, working some pretty big fights and even a handful of title fights. He had little memorabilia and fewer memories from those events. Anytime he thought of being in the ring, he could only think of that night in Chicago, punch after punch landing on Scotty Allhart Harper's chin, his temple, the bridge of his nose. Goddamn, why didn't he fall sooner? Why did his body hold up until a few seconds after the bell at the end of the 12th? Why had he been too tough to drop, but not tough enough to survive? Stupid questions, pointless. There was only one real question that mattered, one question that reporters and spectators and even some other fighters had asked the next day, as soon as news broke that Harper had died in his hospital bed. Why didn't the ref stop the fight? Others shared the scorn and the blame, Harper's cornerman, the ringside doctor, and the fighter's promoter among them. But Laz was closer to the action than them, close enough to effectively be a part of it. It was his job to see when a fighter was out on his feet, a zombie boxing on autopilot while his brain was collecting more damage than it could recover from. Why didn't I stop the fight? He refused to rewatch footage from the bout, and at times he struggled to distinguish his memories of it from his nightmares. Harper's eyes rolling back, his neck snapping from each punch, Laz coming close to stepping in and calling the fight, then watching Harper return a shot or two, looking like he had the slimmest chance of mounting a comeback. He'd chosen to let the fighter called All Heart live up to his nickname, except that credited Laz with making a conscious, defensible decision, and he had no real memory of thinking that clearly, or thinking at all, when he looked back on what happened. You can't still be killing yourself over that, Brian said. Shit, you literally just tried to kill yourself over it. He looked over his shoulder than the other. Before Brian could say it, Laz addressed his concern. The guy's not still out there. He's not going to show up here and shoot me and then take care of a witness or anything. Laz saw his friend's tension deflate, then added, He already came to see me. What? Holy shit! Brian leaned forward. What happened? Did you kill him? Laz shook his head. God, no. If I spent that much on a guy I could kill, I'd be out there tonight trying to find the bastard who conned me. No, I spent about a week getting drunk after I got word that the man agreed to the job. I thought different from you. I thought it was better to die drunk, but my nerves were up, so I could never really get there before I got nauseous and threw up, no matter how much I tried. It didn't help that I kept feeling like there was somebody hovering over me. Whoever was sitting at the stool next to me at a bar, whoever was next to me at a urinal, the guy behind me in line at the deli, they all had me bracing myself like, this is it. They're the one. They're going to give me what I paid for. But I also kind of knew it wasn't going to be someone I noticed. I spent $100,000 on this. I emptied my savings. Whoever was worth it wasn't dumb enough to shoot me in the men's room at a full bar. And I had this weird feeling the whole week that someone was following me before, but like they were hiding perfectly. It was like I grew an extra shadow smart enough to hide in my first shadow. Brian shivered and Laz smirked, wet his lips again, then set his drink down. Yeah, turns out this guy was that good. Worth the money. Hell, I think I might have got a discount. He really had been following me all week, and maybe I had noticed him and unconsciously convinced myself I hadn't, because I didn't want to know it was coming. That was half the point of paying someone else to do it, besides not having to do it myself. Anyway, a couple of nights ago, I come home and my living room lights on, and even though I never leave it on, barely even bother turning it on when I'm there, it's hot as hell inside for some reason, and there's somebody sitting on the couch. The guy? Brian said. Laz nodded. I first thought, this can't be him. I'm expecting a white guy, so white he's invisible, medium height, medium build, hair that's sort of between blonde and brown. The guy who doesn't stand out. This guy, though, long black hair, almost this kind of sunburnt skin. Not like he's brown, not like me, but like maybe one of those white guys who's gone past getting too much sun, except a little more natural looking, but stranger too. I don't know. The point I'm making is that if you saw him, you'd notice him. You'd be able to ID him in a heartbeat. So I imagine he has to be extra good at what he does to still be out here without getting caught. He's got this solid, hard jaw like, you hit him? No, but I could have bruised my knuckles just looking at him. Let me finish. I'm saying this was a hard-looking dude, bad man energy coming off him. He's filled out, looks tall even when he's sitting down. He's got the coldest eyes you've ever seen. I mean, look, we've seen a lot of tough guys. And some of them lived up to the appearances, and some of them would have been better off taking ballet. But trust me when I say this guy looked more like a killer than anyone we've ever seen. I froze up when he looked at me, and even though I didn't want to see it coming, a part of me thought it would be better this way. I'd get a quick prayer out, really confirm that I was good with this. I was about to say that prayer in my head when the guy points at my couch and tells me to sit down. I feel like I have to do it, so I do it. And then what? Then he talked me out of it. Laz let this last comment linger, watched Brian take it in and twirl it around his head for a few seconds. Lacking words for a moment, Brian took another drink, let the lager water his tongue so he could grow something to say. This feels like a bad question, but did you at least get your money back? Brian said. Because if not, if you need some help, you know I've got you. He paid me back, Laz said. Well, in his words, he hired me for a future favor. When he told me he wasn't going to do the job and was giving me my money back, I told him I didn't want it. I wanted what I paid for. That's when he told me he'd been watching me for a week and that he didn't kill guys like me. It would be bad for his rep in business, he said. That wasn't all the man had said, far from it, but Laz didn't want to share that with Brian. He wondered if he'd shared too much already, and if something deep within him had intended to, share enough to warn Brian off, make him call it a night already, get home while he could. Bad for his rep, Brian said. Like he's got an honor system, he doesn't kill women or kids or guys who think they deserve it, but they don't. Something like that, Laz said. You're not the only one I've met like you, the man had told him. I met a bus driver in Arkansas who thought she should die over an accident that killed two kids, even though the other driver was the one asleep at the wheel. I had a nurse hire me because she gave the wrong medicine to a pregnant girl who's still in a coma, even though the machines and computers at the hospital were at least half at fault. I don't kill people like you. There are people far more deserving. I'm sure you know someone. So what kind of favor do you owe him? Brian said. Something soon. He made it seem like he'd done this before, like he bought a future favor off a lot of people. I got the impression he wasn't just a killer. There's more to him. Shit, a lot more from the sound of it. Well, hell, here's to him, Brian said, raising his pint glass. They, he and Laz clinked glasses, and Brian added, and here's to you being here. Damn it, Laz, don't you ever do anything like that again. Jesus, man, I can't even. Just call me when you get the feeling like that. I'll make the time. We can go out, have a night like this, take your mind off of everything. We're having a good night, aren't we? It's been a good night, Laz said. But I can't just drink it all the way every day. I'm not built like that. I'm not like you. Bullshit. You're stronger than me. Yeah, you ever come close to killing yourself over what you did? Brian took a deep breath, a deeper drink from the pint, finishing it. Then he got up, went to the bar, came back with a shot of whiskey. He took care of that before he finally answered Laz. No, can't say I have. Didn't think so. Like I said, I'm not like you. It's different. Nobody knows about my shit. Yours, anybody in the world can read about it or watch a video. You got these hack reporters and internet trolls blaming you for Harper all this time. Maybe if I'd had to deal with that, I'd be in the mindset to check myself out too. I guess I'm lucky that way. Yeah, but yours was more. You were more involved, Laz said. He saw Brian's eyes dip like they were searching for a place to hide. Shit, Brian, we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. I'm sorry. It's all right. Don't apologize. If it helps you not feel like you should kill yourself, we can talk about it all day. Okay, thank you. Laz stilled himself, got ready to take a step over a ledge, fall all the way into a decision he had to make. So how do you deal with it? Laz said. Beyond the booze, I mean. You've got to have a trick or something. It can't be as simple as trying not to think about it. Mostly it is, Brian said. Shit, remember when I told you about it? Yeah. I was almost too drunk to stand, wasn't I? You actually were lying down, Laz said. For all I know, I might have actually been too drunk to stand, Brian said, and laughed like they weren't discussing murder. Laz's guts twisted in a different direction, and he shut his eyes briefly to focus on not throwing up. When Brian had confessed to him years ago, Laz had experienced the same sensation he felt now, and had almost been grateful for it. Brian had shared his secret to help alleviate Laz's remorse over Harper. You feel bad about what you did. That was nothing. You're a saint compared to me. They'd had a mutual friend, Jack Bigfoot Lucas, a lumbering heavyweight who didn't quite have a chin necessary to be more than a step up for other prospects. He had power, though. A lot of guys like Jack, and like Brian for that matter, blew through whatever money they earned in the ring and ended up selling their training and muscle independently to whoever needed it, often on short notice or at a bargain or both. Brian's ultimate sin came at the cost of $500. To be fair to him, he was only supposed to be show work. All about the look, zero action required. Jack had a cousin he treated like a little sister. Her boss at a mom and pop boutique had knocked her up, but then pretended they had never had a relationship and fired her when she confronted him about it. She asked Jack to help her out and gave him $1,000 to put the fear of responsible parenting into this aspiring deadbeat dad. Jack agreed, then approached Brian about the job, saying they could split the money. He thought there'd be less of a chance if there were two of us. Swear to God, we thought we'd just scare this asshole. Between Bigfoot and me, who wouldn't be scared? I didn't know what would happen. I sometimes feel bad about the girl, Brian said now. The guy, to hell with him. You get a girl pregnant like that, try to act like it's not yours, devil himself should show up to take you out. I don't know how a man like that lives with himself, but his daughter, shit. We just didn't know. How could we know? How could they know the guy would fight back despite being outnumbered and untrained? How could they know that this was his weekend with his daughter, all of 15? How could they know she'd wake up, come out of her room, come at them with a kitchen knife to save her idiot father, who was already dead because of one punch from Bigfoot, with an assist from the corner coffee table that he fell onto? How could Brian know Bigfoot would fly into a rage after getting cut by the girl and smash her head into the tile floor one too many times? Now Laz watched Brian finish the last of his drinks. Look, man, I just live with it and try not to think about it, Brian said. There's no trick, no secret. If it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else there. There's a reason Bigfoot shot himself, though, right? He knew it was more him than me. What did I do, really? I helped him clean up. I was there, okay? And, she went for him with a knife, and I helped my friend out. I stopped her. I didn't know what he'd do after. I didn't think that would happen. Shit. All I was supposed to do was just be there? Why did you say dying sober would be better than dying drunk? Laz said. What? I don't know, because you made me pick one. But why? Why that one? Brian shook his head. Just seemed like the right answer. I don't know. I didn't really think about it, man. You should try thinking for once, Laz thought. It could save your life. The gun holstered under his jacket seemed to grow against his ribs, wanting to remind him that it was there, knowing he'd decided close to an hour ago not to go for it unless he needed to. He didn't have to now, and he didn't want to. What he wanted was to get his hands muddy, get his heart pumping, feel sore in the morning, endure the difficulty of the task. He looked over Brian's shoulder and watched the bartender go to the front door, lock it, turn off the open sign, draw the window shades down, then turn back to Laz and nod. Closing time, Laz said. Time to settle up. Oh, shit, Brian said, looking back in time to see the bartender returning to the bar. Should have got a drink for the road. Laz stood, moved beside Brian, gave him his own drink. Have mine. I'm done with it. You sure? Thanks. Brian threw the clear drink back, then almost coughed it back up. He held the glass just below his face at an angle, inspecting it. Jesus, what is this? Tastes like water. Yeah, Laz said, then grabbed the back of Brian's head and slammed him face first through the glass and into the hardwood table. The glass broke on impact. Brian's scream was delayed. The liquor slowed his capacity to register that his nose was busted, and bits of broken glass were lodged in his lips, gums, and cheeks. Laz dragged Brian onto the stone tile floor, held him face down, straddled his upper back, both hands now gripping his head. Laz, what the shit? Laz crushed Brian's face onto the floor, then cried out as he did a second and a third time. There are people more deserving. I'm sure you know someone. The hitman, the man with the frightening eyes and almost burned skin, had told Laz. In fact, I know that you know someone. Then he offered Laz a job that he said he couldn't take because the woman looking to hire him, the relative of another man who'd worked for him, couldn't offer appropriate payment. Again, I have a reputation. Fuck ups work cheap, like your friend Brian. That's why I'm paying you what you paid me. I'll set you up with the place and someone to help in case you need it, so you don't have any excuses. Don't be a fuck up like him. I'm not, Laz eked out as he lifted and smashed Brian's face into the floor again, barely noticing the 3 teeth that skittered across the tile. This was the way it had to be, the imperfect rhyme of past and present that Brian had earned, the work that Laz had long rejected. This is the favor you want me to do, he'd asked the man, and the man had laughed at him. No, this is the favor I'm doing for you. Help you pay back the world what you owe. You thought you could leave without settling up. You should know better, Laz. You're the wrong man to judge when it's time to say it's over. Beneath him, Brian no longer struggled or convulsed. Laz ignored this and kept on, unsure of when to stop. And that's it. The end.
Wow, I love that, Johnny. What a vibe you had running through that.
Indeed.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, so, I don't know, noir is very creepy to me. I think partly because it's cool.
I think there's a little bit of that energy to it. And I know a lot of my favorite noir stories and noir movies have a sort of almost a horror vibe to them when I think about
Right,
them.
right. And they're a little extra creepy because they're very cool and you want to follow them, and yet you know things aren't right.
Yeah, and there's a doomed quality, I think, to everything that really feels horrifying. Like the Coen brothers' Blood Simple um jumps to mind. And that's whole story just feels like people constantly making the wrong decisions, thinking they're going to outsmart and stay ahead of things, and really they were doomed from the start in one way or another for the most part.
Inevitably.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. Now, it is our way here at Story Hour to take a breath or just a moment in between the two writers so that we can let one work sink in and prepare ourselves for the next. Johnny Compton, everybody. Thank you. Our next reader tonight is a Story Hour debut. This is going to be Dee Holloway. Dee Holloway is a writer, library worker, and Floridian in upstate New York. Somehow I suspect there aren't a whole lot of those. Her short work has appeared from publishers including Neon Hemlock, Font Publishing, Diabolical Plots, and World Weaver Press. Her debut novella, Little Nothing, arrived in 2023 from Queen of Swords Press, also a friend of Story Hour. When not writing, she's providing library services for youth, sampling iced coffees, and yelling, "Horse!" on road trips. Dee, welcome to Story Hour.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure to have you. Sounds to me like you're breaking up a little bit. Is anybody else hearing that?
Yeah, I heard a little
Okay.
fuzzy.
Dee, I'm wondering, I hate doing this, but I'm wondering if it might be better for you to wave hello and then turn video off so that we can get the audio from you, because the audio is a little more important.
Probably.
Yeah,
For sure.
It would not be the first this has happened to. Once Daniel did an entire hosting episode from the void. And you sound clearer now.
Yes.
Are you comfortable being a voice
Yeah,
in
my
the darkness?
laptop and Zoom. Oh, absolutely, always.
All right.
Occasionally
Well,
I do
Much
story
better.
time, with the lights off and the
Okay.
windows, the shutters closed, and the kids find it very atmospheric.
Excellent. Well, please speak to us from the darkness.
That's actually very, very apropos. The story I'm going to be reading is in the new issue of Castle Jack
Are you there, Dee?
Which is a local magazine to me and weird. And for it, yes.
Excellent. Let's hear it.
So this is it was the custom of the glove maker, being well established, to select his bride from among the pupils of the Union Seminary, a school of some local renown, and whose fame in the region. I say custom because veil became shroud with astonishing swiftness. Not a year had passed between the glover and his bride before the young woman fell ill, carried on the fever tide that took more than 40 of the town that year, and went early to her grave. It was mermaided 2 bodies, one within the other, and with them the glover's hopes. All the town had heard, if not seen themselves, of the bride's hands folded peacefully over her abdomen, bearing with her to the beyond a pair of black kidskin gloves, buttoned with 2 jet beads. Had heard and seen all the more vividly in their minds her young face, said to be unmarred by fever. The man himself held his head upright, conducted his period of mourning in good graces, and took up visiting hours once more with the seminary. It was not untoward, you understand. It was well within propriety for sober men of substance to situate well-bred but destitute young women within their households, whether as governesses, ladies' maids, or wives, and where in all the region could be found such a fine supply, such a concentrated richness.
Dee, I think we lost audio for a second there. Could you back up maybe a paragraph and try again?
You with us, Dee?
Well, this is just terrible. It looks like Dee is still connected, but I can't hear her at all.
No, neither can I.
Oh. Dee, maybe if you could try muting and then unmuting again, you could try that again.
Or even logging out and logging back in, perhaps, if the
Mhm.
muting and unmuting.
Is it back? It is not back.
It's back. Yeah, I can hear you now. Did you catch where we left off? Ish?
Yes, I'll start at
Okay,
the last
good.
line.
Okay. And it might help also if you speak slowly, because sometimes when you get breaking up like this, that's just a little more forgiving. Don't worry.
For
we'll
sure.
cut you off.
Despite her youthful flesh and her gown's meticulous embroidery, all the wedding crush agreed that the gloves were the height of her beauty, the crowning element, even beyond a small bridal tiara crouched upon her thickly coiled hair. For all the suitable pair they made, the glover tall and hardy, ruddy with good health and money, his bride well made and doting. Soon enough there stood but one figure at the garden gate. In the time that followed, it seemed that the glover rode a great wheel, terrible and implacable, not dispassionate, for all men know that death comes for them in turn, but fixated. Not hardly had he selected his bride from the seminary's ranks and bore her to the altar, but that some malady descended, a fall down the stairs of her newly installed cold pantry, an early spring chill lingering too long in the lungs. Chatter swept the seminary's halls, whispers among the girls of choose again, and who his eye might fall upon, and whether she would be so lovely, so good and so correct in manner and form, so powerful and transformative a figure as to break the Glover's curse. There was a mania for the Glover among the seminary's pupils, a compassion turning fervid behind lifted fans and muffling fingers, for many girls dream of breaking fortune's wheel. Many girls dream also of beauty where there has only been modesty, luxury replacing privation, and the tales of the Glover's nuptial gifts grew ever more boldly embroidered. Gloves of Caribbean peccary, dyed softest blue and buttoned with mother of pearl, and gloves of sheer Venetian needle lace, gloves of buttery kid skin, softer than the bride's own cheek, and gloves tailored so finely a feather could not have slipped between edge and arm. The pupils had come from homes modest at best, and from homes no homes at worst. And despite their prudent training, their lessons' soberness, girlhood's vivid dreams crowded back in when night fell. So it was not with trepidation, but with avarice that they watched their sisters sally forth to meet fortune on her battlefield, each new bride tripping merrily to the grave. For the Glover's part, he wore his mourning well. Some men withered when their helpmeets journeyed beyond, but the Glover's stature remained stout, with black and gray sallowed complexions, often to be red, nearly that of exertion. A largesse of apples in their season, of butter churns full to spoiling, as though he too believed all within his control was man's hard ride. There came an autumn wedding, the weather inauspicious, the moon a slight fingernail. Nevertheless, the Glover took to wife a seminarian whom, the town's wives so whispered, was perhaps not measured to its proud traditions, nor to the Glover's standards of comeliness and wifely aptitude. The girl was mean of form, thin of face, and yet all present for the ceremony and feast swore that throughout the day she warmed to her new role as it was bestowed, that roses bloomed in her cheeks and dull chestnut hair took on a wine-like sheen, that the 16 button gloves cradle her arms like a lover's caress. Quite correctly, they'd been dyed virginal white, but about the wrists winked merest hints of pink stitching, the embroidered shapes of which eluded onlookers' eyes. Some supposed hearts, cabbage roses, apples of Eden. At any rate, the town wives tittered, that blush pink just skirted salaciousness, lingering in the eyes as the bride lifted her bouquet or waved to the crowd. She remained greedy of her gloves, even after taking up residence in the Glover's house. So enamored was she, or his finest gloves yet, that she couldn't, nor to direct the servants about their daily business, nor even a bed. So he spied, eye close upon the keyhole, in her bower. It flattered, such that he permitted it into winter. It was death season in earnest, the culls and slaughters done. Town and Glover alike began to believe that this bride, for all her murky origin and modest virtues, had beaten fortune at her game. In such a season, Men's bodies are compelled to seek warmth and comfort. For his part, the Glover considered he had been quite accommodating. The girl was not the youngest of his brides, but he sensed she had less knowledge of the world than the others, had perhaps been lonely at the Union Seminary, certainly had attracted no prospects save himself. It was time at last for her to take up her mantle in earnest, to become a wife, and he had no small inkling that she would take to it. He considered her predecessors, fine girls in their ways, but they had failed him. But in their failures, had they not also built the foundations of her success, her continued vitality? Graveyard dirt would prove fruitful, the hosts of brides before watching over his wife as angels. Thus he visited her bower in the cold of January, just after the year's turning, and found the door unlocked. Wondering if all that time she had been awaiting him, he claimed pride of place in her bed. Soon enough, she rejoined from the washroom, a flicker of candlelight snuffed by the door closing. In the soft dark she moved, not toward him, but sinuously, slender arms stretched high and then draped, without hurry, down over her body. She hugged herself and twirled, the girlish movement intoxicating, her feet so light upon the floor, no creak emanated from the boards. The white gloves gleamed, moonlit, the only indication of where her hands danced. He watched rapt as silken fingers traced a corset's lacings and a bustle's tapes. And in the soft dark, there came a shush of cloth on cloth, of skirt, bodice, chemise stripping away and sintering to the carpet. Yet the wan moonlight displayed not a growing expanse of flesh, but a shadow. Each piece of clothing removed something more with it, something essential, some piece of his bride as she swayed, now close to the bed. Now closer, no starry glimmer on long hidden skin, but only a ripple of deepest sable. Now beside him, within reach as he had long desired, and his swelling lust not thwarted by the sight of this mass of shadow, the only remnant of the bride, her gloves welcoming him to a caress. And that is The Glover's Bride.
That's lovely, Dee. Did you have another brief one for us tonight, or was that all?
I did in a piece that was published a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's about 15 minutes, so it should fit.
It's perfect. Just please go ahead and give us the publication data and the title again, because the Pixies got jealous and broke up that a little bit again.
For sure. This one was published in 2022 by Diabolical Plots. The title is Downstairs at Dino's. The great Diabolical Plots, one of my favorites. Okay. It was a Friday evening when the boys rolled in, of course. The nights were uncurling from themselves a little, stretching out toward high summer, and the first flicker of the boys' sharp-oiled hairlines was a sure sign the school year was well behind us, nothing but river water and sunburns ahead. I was manning the cash register in the bottle shop downstairs. Le Cave du Vin, the new sign out front proclaimed, like anybody in town was going to go for fancy fake French on a package owned by Italians, for as long as our part of New York had belonged to the British. Dino's, blared the restaurant sign in blinking red, and then, now, right next to it, Le Cave du Vin in scrolly white. The new manager sure had a high opinion of herself. You didn't catch her at the cash register. No, that was of minimum wage peons only, and Dino's 4 summers running. No loyalty these days, is what my father said. I'll wink nudge, like maybe I'd finally take his advice and go down to the union shop on Crescent Street and learn to be a plumber. The promise of tips on the nights I waited tables upstairs kept me honest. And the boys were big tippers. Nobody had seen them in town yet this summer. They were a seasonal occurrence, blown in from the coast or maybe the city. The only tourists who appeared year after year in our 300 miles from nowhere town. Or at least I hadn't seen them. And not even a warning text from anybody who reliably had the gossip. But here they were, converging, inevitable. There were 4 of them cruising straight for the local grapes, or maybe 5. That was the thing about the boys. You figured you had them nailed down, and then another shot up from behind the fireball display, fingers above their head and devil horns to mock the tacky cardboard standee. Another would be popping open mini travel-sized Smirnoffs, guzzling them like Capri Suns, while the ringleader, whichever it was that night, doled out wads of bills deliberately, smiling. My old boss, the 3rd Dino, God rest his soul, had a sense of humor about it. You had to, with the boys. No telling what they'd get into if you pissed them off. They were like cats that way, sleek and pretty and sharp-eared and absolutely fucking amoral. The ringleader hadn't made themselves known, but they would, one way or another. I edged my phone out headlong. Maybe it was the tallest, wearing jeans that were too short, but in that way that you knew was intentional, probably tailored on purpose to show off ankles carved from obsidian. Might be the loud one, laughing with a red tongue over red lips. Then there was the tiny one, bubbly like the knockoff Aperol spritzes Joey's girlfriend liked to drink on the dock. Champagne curls and golden eyes and bronze-spattered skin. And the last of the boys looked like a shadow, soft and wispy black, sketched along the floorboards and drifting in the air. Or was that the last? I still couldn't tell. Still, as I watched them and texted one-handed to tell Joey and the rest of our crew that the boys had arrived for the season, still couldn't number them. Still they swam in my head like I'd been ripping into the Jack Daniels on my break. Something moved in my stomach, or lower. The new manager coughed behind my shoulder. What did we decide about texting at the register? I still called her new. We all did, even if she'd bought out Dino the Third after he retired to the Catskills more than half a year ago, and then kicked off with a heart attack before he got to enjoy the scenery. She was always frowning, Delia, her whole body frowning before the expression hit her face. But right now, her face was a frown too. We hadn't decided anything either way. Dino the Third had never cared if I texted at the register, but Delia thought it was trashy, that it put across the wrong aura, that kids today have much higher incidence of compressed spinal discs. Did you know that, due to staring down at phone screens all day? She moved on before I decided whether it was worth it to defend myself. The boys making an appearance was big news. Everybody needed to know I was the one seeing them first. Do you know those? She meant the boys. Weird as hell sort of question. Everyone knew them. I said, low. What do you mean? Are those... She was all at a loss, tongue edging around her lips, trying to figure out a word to use. Friends of yours? The anyone's friends. Look on my face and tilted my head. The state of things at Dino's these days went easier if Delia thought I was a dumbass. She was annoying enough that I was counting the days till summer ended. God damn, what a cramp in my style. To look forward to 7:30 a.m. classes and the half-hour bus ride to the consolidated high school because I hadn't managed to save enough for a car. Or maybe annoying was the wrong word for Delia. It was more that she was a presence, like the space the youth pastors told you to leave between you and your dance partner, a Jesus-shaped void. Even if you didn't believe in it, you couldn't ignore it. Dino the Third had never been a presence, and probably his pops hadn't either. Just drifted in to rearrange some of the Chardonnays in their rustic apple crates and drifted out again for a smoke. I didn't steal, they didn't talk to me. I rang up the customers, they paid me. And here's Delia with her fingers and everything, bringing extra rolls of quarters to the register when I didn't need more, and upending every display on Friday like clockwork. Tanqueray with the brandy just to fuck. At least that was how it seemed. Seemed like she didn't appreciate regular customers, like she looked down her nose at them. I'm sure if the Dino's package had a frequent buyer program, some of the townies would have been in the drunk tank more than they were. But they paid. No matter what you're selling, regulars keep the lights on. The boys weren't regulars exactly, but it was generally agreed that they kept the town's lights on. She watched them all the way down the aisle of Australian whites, Delia, her eyes moving and the rest of her stock still. The ringleader picked up a bottle of Pinot Grigio, almost the color of their hair. A month from now, half the kids at school would have bleached their hair trying to match. It was kind of a thing in town once Labor Day passed and everyone was back in school. You'd end up scouring the vintage shops and the outlet mall by the university, scraping together a new uniform for the year that looked like the dregs of the boys' closets. Nobody ever managed to pass for one of the boys, but we tried. It wasn't shit you'd pull during the summer when the whole troop of them was here. They were too lofty to figure you were mocking them, but it was more that nobody could touch them. There was no point in even attempting it. It wouldn't catch their eye. They wouldn't be impressed. If they were going to look at you, they were going to, regardless of whether you were wearing designer or your dad's hand-me-down Carhartt gaiter. Everybody wanted the boys to look at them, but by the time you were my age, you'd given up being overt about it. Either you'd flail through summer seeing them around town, feeling like you were drowning every time they ignored you, or you'd get the action of your life. You'd wake up the next morning feeling like your soul had been sucked out of your cock and grateful for it. This, according to Joey, like he knew. You'd swagger into work, and even if you never saw any of the boys again, even if the leaves changed that day and they were gone on the wind, you'd never forget. All dependent on them. Delia said, "You're 17, isn't that right, Mr. Diaz?" Mr. Diaz. Always. I doubted she even knew my first name. I nodded, scanning a handle of Jameson real slow, not letting the bottle clink too hard against the sensor in case her ears perked up at the notion that I was abusing merchandise and in front of a customer. The regular buying the whiskey stared at me, chewing his mustache. Delia ignored him, zeroing in on me. And you'd never think to try to buy liquor underage. I realized the boys were underage. Poor old Delia had come around and whipped this ship into shape. I'd never availed myself of the coolers of jug wine or swiped vodka from the storeroom. Dino the Third hadn't cared too much, clapped my shoulder now and then when he bothered to breeze in, joked in his musty cigar, boys being boys. Which was probably part of the equation giving Delia a hernia. It was just easy shorthand, a catch-all. Even the lucky towny bitches and sons of bitches who'd scored with the boys, in my day or my parents', couldn't have said with any certainty the parts involved, the mechanics of their bliss. Here, the bubbly ringleader, petite and prettier than anything out of Hollywood, jeans that clung and curly hair. The tall one, supermodel elegant with wicked lips, and the red-mouthed laughing one, and the shadow, hair like an inkwell, wearing a shirt unbuttoned halfway to their waist. The general effect was show-stopping sex. Charisma like an avalanche, like the theme song of Jaws playing faintly as you walked through town and then rounded a corner and realized why. The town was breathless for them. Ticked down the days until the boys appeared, opened a tab in every bar and restaurant that never closed for the boys, swept the streets and chlorinated the YMCA pool and rounded up feral cats to make way for the boys. Local goddamn holiday, high summer, and the boys. I finally told Delia, no ma'am, and the Jameson regular snorted, tucked his whiskey in its brown bag against his chest, and carried it to the stairwell leading back up to Dino's proper. Delia hummed. They were nearly to the register, carting half the store with them. Dino the Third had never charged them. I remembered my first summer working, paid under the table because I was only 14. And most of all, I remembered the chief among the boys that year. I remembered a throat opened wide right in the store and liquor poured down it. A steady white hand and a steady vein pulsing in a white throat, larynx throbbing, the others howling and clapping and chanting. Remembered a neat roll of bills withdrawn from the clip and rejected. Dino's gray head dipping, more solicitous than I am. Remembered stumbling home after my shift like I was the one drunk, though Joey and I hadn't discovered the glories of out-county ditch vodka yet. Remembered what it felt like coming to that memory of the boys' ringleader swigging gin clear as water. We'll need to see ID, of course, Delia said. My heart swooped right down into my sneakers. The bubbly ringleader paused, head cocked. The rest stilled, murmuring and giggling, eyeing Delia almost appreciatively. Oh, said the ringleader, and my heart kept going, down, down, boring a hole to hell. Why, how very vintage. I'm afraid I didn't bring it with me. I'd heard boys talking in exaggerated, put-on ways like that. Really talk.
Dee, the Pixies cut on again. Could you try the mute and unmute again? I've been following along and we lost you right before you said really top drawer in the accent I can't do. I'm dying to hear you do it. Still not hearing you, Dee. Try muting and unmuting again because I'm on tenterhooks. Please. Okay, we see that you're muted. So when you unmute again.
All right, Delia, not going down without a fight.
Right?
My laptop might be, though. Okay. Where were we? Delia adjusted her name tag, the one that said Delia Montgomery, in letters that matched Cave du Vin outside the door, I suppose as a reminder that I was supposed to call her Ms. Montgomery. All customers present identification. New York takes the delinquency of minors very seriously. The shop was so quiet, I thought I could hear Tatiana upstairs, slapping a customer for grabbing her ass at the table. The boys' bottles clinked together as I slid the last of them into a Leah took the paper sacks from me. Clear as day, she didn't know what she'd done. The boys were an institution. Nobody told them no, and it wasn't like they used that as an excuse to run wild over the town. But there was a biblical feel to the place in the days immediately after the boys left. We all looked like locusts had stripped us of anything green. It was hangover time. We wanted to drink a lot of water and wear sunglasses indoors. Joey told me once that it reminded him of those infomercials on TV. If you experience an erection for longer than 12 hours, please call our hotline. Because it hurt, in truth, it stung, that kind of stimulation, but you still wanted it. Nobody would bar the boys from town, even if they could. Nobody would demand to see a boy's ID, even if their perfection could be captured by the DMV's camera. The shadow laughed, silky as spring water. My heart was no longer in the region of my chest. I quit, I said quickly. I'd already said too much. If Delia hadn't been here, I'd have rung the boys up and watched them flow out the door again to a boat party or a rager at the old mill house, and just texted Joey and the rest the big news. But she was here. And honestly, wasn't that fucking sad? A grown-ass woman and not even bad looking with nothing better to do on a Friday night but come to work. She was here and they were here, and maybe she was new in town, but somebody should have clued her in. Somebody should have noted in the little welcome to Vestal packet how things ran, how the boys were prime customers, how the summer flowers sprang up when they walked through, and the clock tower at Mary Queen of the Universe chimed when they laughed. Somebody should have told Delia the score before she went and got her head ripped off. Somebody was going to pay blood. But that somebody wasn't me. Like I was the thorn in her side. Like there wasn't a tidal wave poised to drench both of us. I quit, I said again, my apron already off and tossed on the counter. And I backed out from behind it, bumping through the swinging door. You didn't turn your back on the boys unless that's what they wanted, unless their arms were around you, their mouths on the nape of your neck. Have a good night, Delia. She wouldn't. Holy God, she would not. Gents. That was a safe thing to call them. Gents, boys, rakes and malls sometimes from people my grandparents' age. Fillies, flaneurs, some fancy word, that one, something about walking. And really, they weren't picky as long as you were polite, if you had cause to speak to them or about them. In my case, not speaking to them, at least in farewell, would have been the wrong move. The wrong move in Delia's case had been opening her mouth to begin with. I shut the stairwell door on her scream. And that is Downstairs at Dino's.
Wow, I loved that. All three stories tonight had so much voice, so distinct. And speaking of voice, if anybody had trouble because the Pixies kept interrupting Dee, we have the link to the eyeball version at Diabolical Plots in the, what am I calling it? The chat in Zoom and in Facebook. Wow, thank you both so much. This has been amazing.
Great, that's fantastic.
Despite all of the wildness that we've been going through technologically, it's been amazing. Oh, well, Daniel and I are here every week. And next week, we'll be back with Eliane Bui and Vajra Chandrasekera, who will have for us wonderful stories and possibly more correct pronunciations of their names. My apologies in advance. I recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the reading for any announcements or any changes. And that's also a good place to learn about upcoming authors. Mark your calendar. You can watch any programs you may have missed at the Story Hour page on